no matter how organized or how much planning you do, there's always going to be an element of chaos, especially when you're on your own, right? You're doing everything all the time. So just sort of embracing that and understanding that just because things are chaotic doesn't mean that things aren't happening, things aren't going well. It just means it's just part of an adjustment phase. It's just part of the process of becoming an entrepreneur and that journey. And actually, it just takes time and you just got to sort of embrace it.
Hey guys, welcome back to the 1,000 Card Project podcast. Super excited about this one. We got Joe Watchorn, JJJ Cards, based over in the UK, and went full-time card dealer about 9 months ago. I told this story off camera to him. Part of my coaching journey has been coaching around the world, and so I've always looked at things from a global perspective. And so it was really cool just to see Joe document his journey of going full-time over these last 9 months on YouTube. And so I thought it would be a cool guy to get to know, but a cool guy to have on the podcast. So appreciate you coming on, man.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here.
Joe, I mentioned you went full time about 9 months ago or whatever. What were some of the lessons that you learned going full time that you didn't know prior to, that you felt or have been like those key lessons that you've learned early in this journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the biggest learning for me, especially in the first half of those 9 months, is that no matter how organized or how much planning you do, there's always going to be an element of chaos. This is basically my first time being an entrepreneur. I worked in the corporate world for 2.5 years prior to quitting my jobs. That was quite a structured and rigid world, whereas jumping into the world of entrepreneurship full time, I tried to apply that same sort of process and organization early on, and it just didn't work because it's just too chaotic, especially when you're on your own, right? You're doing everything all the time. So just sort of embracing that and understanding that just because things are chaotic doesn't mean that things aren't happening, things aren't going well. It just means it's just part of an adjustment phase. I remember very well, like, this is proper startup story, I guess. I had all my stock in my old room at my parents' house. I living in a separate flat with my girlfriend, and then I just got a storage unit. And I thought, oh, you know what? It'd be simple. I can move some of my stock from my parents' house into my storage unit. It took weeks because I just didn't understand, and I underestimated sort of how long that would take. And it felt like at the time like I was out of control. I had cards absolutely everywhere, stuff absolutely everywhere. I was going to my parents' house to pack up orders for things that I'd sold that weren't in the unit yet, all that sort of thing. But just sort of learning to understand that is just part of the process of becoming an entrepreneur and that journey. And actually, it just takes time, and you just got to sort of embrace it in that short to medium term, I'd say. I'm not sure whether you found the same thing in your experience as well.
Yeah, I think early on for me, like I was coaching 16 hours a day. So, like I focused on the process first and made sure that I had the tools and the software and
Yeah.
everything in place so that I could be super efficient. But I think your point of being in chaos, like it
Yeah.
always seems like there's something to do,
Yeah, so I didn't do that. Maybe I should have done that. But it's also at the same time, I sort of don't regret it because I kind of learned a lot through it.
100%. Yeah, that's the best way to learn, right?
Yeah.
And it's also sometimes you do, like I probably bought too expensive of a scanner or too expensive of a
Yeah.
thermal
Yeah, of
printer.
course.
Oh, like I probably could have done a little bit better if I was a little bit more strategic about it. But, I mentioned you're in the UK and I even reached out to you recently when I went over there to see if there was a card show that was close by where I was going or whatever. I know outside of the obvious, right? Outside of the obvious of soccer and rugby being more prevalent than maybe baseball and football, what are some of the biggest differences between the UK card scene and the United States?
Great question. I think one thing actually I'm quite passionate about is people. Obviously, the US is the hub of sports cards. Most of the sports card deals are done in America. Most of the big bucks are in America when it comes to big deals. And I think because that's been the case for so long, a lot of people in the UK are sort of slightly disillusioned by all the content they watch from American YouTubers or they read on American articles and think that the same sort of things apply to the UK. There is just generally less money in the room at a card show, for example, than there would be in the US. You don't have people walking around, although this is changing. You don't have people walking around with sort of $20,000 or pounds in their bag ready to drop on a table at a card show. You've got mainly collectors who are looking for sort of the 50 to 200 pound range cards. So I think there's a sort of this sort of disalignment between how people perceive the UK market and how it actually is. Most of my deals and most of my business comes from people that are collectors looking to spend £50 to £200, I'd say, at a card show or on Whatnot or on eBay. It doesn't come from dealers buying me out for 85% or a collector coming up to me with £1,000. We just don't have that sort of level of knowledge or confidence yet. And that's not to say that isn't changing. But we've just come off the back of the London Card Show this weekend and had my best ever show ever. Did lots of deals, but it wasn't like 10 £5,000 deals. It was lots of £50 deal, £100 deal, £200 deal. And I think one thing I'd suggest to anyone listening who wants to come over to the UK or who's from the UK is that the market here is probably, I'd say, 5 to 10 years behind the US. It's definitely getting there. We had the Fanatics store open in London. We're having lots more businesses come into the space, lots of more interest in the business side of the hobby, but it's still sort of relatively new to us. It's only really taken off in the last 5 years. And people will tell you that prior to that time, it was very, very, very sort of much more quiet market. So that's been my biggest one. I think as well, especially in the UK as well, we have quite a lot of, this is kind of probably an alien concept to Americans, but sports cards aren't really that common in shops in the UK. We've only really had our first card shops open in the last 5 years. And prior to that, you only really had like kids card. They called them Match Tax and Adrenaline, which will buy Tops and Panini in Sainsbury's, which is our supermarket, where you don't really have sports card shops. You could never really hit an autograph card prior to 5 years ago from a supermarket packet of cards. So learning the sort of more premium side of the hobby has been very, very new to everyone here. And it's been great for the hobby, but we've got to remember that most people, including myself, have come in to the hobby as kids that were buying packs of cards for £1 that were literally just basically Top Trump style cards. And there was never really this allure of like being able to open a Chrome or Prism in a supermarket or from a shop. So that's just to that point, just to sort of emphasize really that we are a little bit behind the US in that sense. When I went into Target, when I went over to the National, that I was blown away. Like there's a whole aisle of sports cards. We've got maybe lucky to have like one stand.
So sometimes that's the case. It seems like that's the case here because it's hard to find and
True.
sometimes wiped out. But I agree with you. I think, yeah, I mean, there's definitely this perception that, you know, the high dollars and these big card shows, and I think at the big ones it is like that. But I think most of the card shows that people are going to are exactly what you're saying. They're looking at that 50 to 200 pound, you know, £200, $200, and
Absolutely.
trying to stay in that range. And I think there is probably a better collector base over in the UK for sure, rather than the flippers and the things like that
Yeah,
here in the US.
I'd say 95% of the deals I did over the last weekend as a reference point would have been collectors.
Yeah, it's
And then
great,
5% were dealer to dealer or businesses coming in and buying out stock.
which makes it sustainable long term. So it's good
Yeah,
that
it's
you
exciting. I mean, that's why I think Fanatics have come to London, because they see how many collectors there that they can leverage, and it's exciting because I think spectators and collectors and flippers are good for the hobby, and they're probably we're going to get more of them as they come in, and that's only going to really grow the market alongside as more collectors come in as well.
agreed. Yeah, you know, my contention on this show has always been that I think there's the hobby of collecting in cards, and I think there's the hobby of the entrepreneurial side of the business,
Absolutely.
of the hobby business too. And I think both are enjoyable, and both have a place, you know. But I think it's also important that um, you know, this ecosystem exists of having avid collectors with people that are moving cards with
Yeah.
different marketplaces and those types of things. You mentioned, you know, Whatnot and card shows and buying collections and you kind of, you know, doing a little bit of everything right now. What are the 2 or 3 main strategies that you've used to kind of level up your business over the course of these last 8, 9 months?
I'd say first and foremost, by a long shot without any shadow of a doubt, would be consistency with my social media content. So I had a large eBay shop prior to quitting my job. I hadn't started on Whatnot, and I had a small YouTube channel. Over the last sort of 8 to 9 months, I've really put in a concerted effort into being consistent with content, and not just any old content, but content that actually adds value. So people will look at that content and learn something, or it might introduce them to a new perspective. And that's opened up so many opportunities for me. I've now done some work with Tops, hopefully do some work with Panini at some point potentially. We're seeing more businesses come in. People who are putting out content on social media are often the people that these businesses look to because their voices in the hobby, and they bring in customers. So I have people come up to me at card shows being like, I watched your YouTube video, I know you buy collections, would you be interested in my things? And being able to have them come up to me before anyone else is a real value added advantage. So that's been huge for me across Instagram, TikTok and YouTube. Those are my 3 primary platforms at the moment. I'm trying to be as consistent as possible. Obviously people don't realize sometimes how much effort that actually requires, especially when at the start it's not earning you any money at all, and you could be doing other things which are, but obviously there's a longer term benefit to all of that. And then secondly, to be fair, what you mentioned is joining a live streaming platform. So I joined Whatnot in the last 6 months, looking to join eBay Live in the next 2 or 3 months as well. And that's been a real benefit to my business because it's allowed me to, as anyone will tell you, right, in a startup, cash flow is so important. And the great thing about Whatnot is you might not necessarily get top dollar every time for every single one of the cards that you sell, but it means you get guaranteed cash flow. You know, if I do a stream a week, I get on average this amount a week. It means I can keep money coming into the business. And then that allows me to go and buy those big collections that I've recently started doing on my YouTube channel, which I wouldn't have been able to do prior because I wouldn't have had that cash flow available.
Yeah, I think obviously with the cash flow piece, that's big in any startup,
Yeah, of
and being
course.
able, be able to jump on opportunity when it presents itself, whether it's coming to your table at a show or a collection that's brought to you, or maybe you're on your own live streams or other people's live streams, and you're taking advantage of that. What has been the main sources of inventory for you when you're going, and like I always love when you go through your flick throughs, like the dollar box, like like when you're trying to fill that stuff, where are you getting your inventory from?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's probably my most asked question I get from everyone, and it's two main ways. It's social media, so people messaging me being like, "Would you like to buy my collection?" One of the biggest collections I bought, which is when I flew to Dublin a couple of weeks ago to buy a huge, almost 10K value collection, came through introductory through someone who'd seen my YouTube videos and at card shows. So I've got a buying sign at card shows. I was one of the first in the UK, I think, to properly take that sort of US approach of having a station where you're just buying all day. So I've been doing that for the last 4 or 5 shows. I buy significant amount of my inventory at shows from collectors looking to cash out or whatever. And actually, as I go forward, I'm looking to do that even more. So I'm looking to really ramp up the buying at card shows because for me, right, as someone who's, this hopefully is going to change soon, but it's just on my own at the moment. And it's a really easy way to buy lots of stock at a short period of time. Going through social media, sending photos, asking for information takes a lot of time. Whereas if someone comes up to you, you can look at the card straight away, make an offer, either yes or no, and you sort of do that over and over and over again. So those are probably my two. But I wouldn't be as successful as I am at car shows buying if it wasn't for the social media and the reputation piece.
I think the social media is so important. I want to dig into that a little bit further. But when you talk about like cash flow and strategy there, and again, you don't have to be specific with your numbers and those types of things. What is a typical percentage or a buy rate? Because you can't buy everything, right? And you need to be able to make a profit on the things that you do buy, and you want to be able to move that inventory quickly. What are you targeting in kind of a buy rate on those types of things?
No, I can be open about that. And my base point is normally around 70%, 70 to 75%. What people don't realize about the UK is there's less people buying at card shows, which does mean that you can get things for slightly cheaper. I was over at the National and people were buying at 80, 90%. However, that is probably changing. By the last London card show, I was mainly buying around 80%. And obviously for those bigger collections, normally you're a little bit more room because you're buying so much. So normally you're at 60 or 65. So I hover around the 70 to 75. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But that's sort of my general rule. But I also do buy, because of the way the UK market is, it's not just like Topps Chrome Prism singles at shows. It's also like those kids cards that actually sell very well on the secondary market. And I get those for much cheaper. Match Tax, Adrenaline, early like Star Wars cards that you got in the UK supermarkets. Those stuff you can buy it much cheaper because there's less people buying it. But if you go over to my eBay store, which is actually called That Card, that's my business name, you'll see all that stuff there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the buying piece, when you were kind of putting yourself out there outside of maybe putting the sign at the card show, how were you intentional on your social media about, well, hey, bring me your collections, bring me,
Yeah. That's a great question, actually. It just sort of, it was nothing sort of over. It was more just I kept hammering home in every video. I've bought this from this place. I'm always buying more. It was more subliminal marketing, if I'm being honest. Sort of just referencing it over and over again. Obviously, the card show videos, people see me buying all the time as well. I make a conscious effort to catch those deals actually more. I actually prefer catching deals of me buying at shows than I do of deals of me selling, because you can get loads of people selling stuff at car shows. It's not actually that interesting, I don't think. The buying stuff is, because people see new cards in every single deal. So that's probably, I would say, that way. But also it's just the fact that because I've been documenting this journey of going full time into cards, people sort of recognize that I'm now more of a business. Before I was more of a collector, now I'm more of a business, and so they see that as more of a place to go to sell cards.
I think that's a critical piece that you just mentioned because I think there has to be whenever you're producing because I think there's a lot of people that want to do social media content,
Of course.
but just putting content out there without having some sort of action being taken that could be as simple as a follow, but it could also be like putting in those kind of subliminal messages or that marketing or that I think that is an important place where you start to kind of train your audience on the things that you're trying to accomplish and
Totally.
um, that's super smart, super smart. What about, with your business, these last 9 months, what tools have been, outside of your normal scanner, thermal printer,
Yeah.
things like that? What are some of the tools that you were like, I couldn't live without this?
That's a good question because my first answer would be my scanner and then my then my label printer. I mean, this is really boring, but like having like proper shelving units actually was a game changer for me. So as I mentioned earlier, my stock used to be in my old room in my parents' house. It was like, for example, sometimes when I sold a card, I had to move like 3 boxes to get to the box behind it. That's so inefficient. Whereas now I've got a storage unit with specific shelves for cards. I can just pull stuff out, pick it out, pull it back. Takes way less time and obviously way less effort. I don't know if that really counts as an answer, but that's kind of what I would say, actually.
I think efficiency, I mean, again, there's a Pokemon dealer over in the UK actually that did an IKEA shelving
Yeah, this one behind me
system.
is IKEA. Yeah, that's IKEA behind
Yeah,
me. Yeah,
I think and so, like, when I saw that, even though it cost more money than maybe I wanted to spend on some shelves, I was like, "That makes complete sense." Like, it's gonna make my life easier, and it hides to where, when I have people over to the house, we don't see a bunch of cards everywhere,
yeah,
and
and it's sort of like mentally, it's less stressful because
less
it's
clutter.
easier to see, less color. Exactly. Yeah,
I agree with that so much. Yeah, that's smart. That's super smart. You got the World Cup coming to the US here,
yeah.
next year, and obviously soccer's huge around the world, but not as much here. What are 2 or 3 players, 2 or 3 sets that people could target going into the World Cup that, they're not names that are on the tip of everybody's tongue over here, but they'll be the ones being talked about in the World Cup.
Question. This is very subjective. I'll start with the sets. I think that obviously there's a lot of it that I don't need to tell you that obviously Messi and Ronaldo have been the two players that have been on the biggest bull run in the last sort of 3 to 4 months because of that World Cup hype, probably amongst other reasons as well. So I won't count those, but obviously those two will be the most talked about alongside Lamine Yamal ahead of the World Cup. Lamine Yamal is probably the most exciting rookie right now in the world. He's unbelievable, and obviously Messi and Ronaldo. This is probably their last World Cup each. So those three will be the biggest three. In terms of underrated sets, I'll start with that whilst I think about the back of my head players. The early modern stuff for soccer. So we got our first ever Prism set in 2014. That was 2014 Prism World Cup. Prior to that, we'd never ever had a sort of a high end hobby set in sport in soccer. So anything in sort of that early modern phase, 2014 to 2020, when things were printed a bit less. Because there was less demand. They're a bit rarer, harder to come by. I love buying stuff like that, and they're very liquid. When I went to the SoCo Expo International earlier this year, that stuff went for me first, the sort of the 2015, 2020 modern stuff of good players. So that's what I would say for that in terms of the sets. The thing about players, it's a tough one because we're so far out from the World Cup that we're not going to get we're going to get players potentially coming to the scene in this time. One of my big like players that I love is Cole Palmer. Currently plays for Chelsea, English, plays for Chelsea. The only question about him is whether he'll fit into the England team. But as a player, he is exceptional and potentially one of the, for me, potentially could be one of the best players in the world when he's fit. Speaking of Chelsea players, another one that's got a lot of hype recently is Esteval. He's Brazilian winger, very, very young. I think he's 19, currently playing for Chelsea. Had a good start to the season, and Brazilian players in particular get a lot of excitement around them because traditionally they've been the best in the world. Esteval's another one. I'm trying to think of other players. The other one I like, but he's already had his sort of hype phase, if I can say it like that, is Pedri, Spanish midfielder, one of the best midfielders to watch right now. Very young still. I think he's 20 or 21. But he has already had his sort of hype phase, so his price has gone up, then down. So we might see a rebound. My potential winners of the World Cup will be Spain. I always think they're in contention because they're so good. But right now they've got a squad full of potential. Obviously, Lamine Yamal plays for them as well. But I'd watch out for Pedri. He's for me one of my favorite midfielders in the world.
So when you mentioned guys like Palmer or Estival or Petra or even Lamine Lamal, like which rookie card are you targeting that you think?
Yeah,
or maybe one that maybe isn't the best one. It's going to be the high dollar. It's going to rise with whatever rise comes with a World Cup or an international tournament.
yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, it does depend on the player and what set they have. Esteval's an interesting one because he came from the Brazilian league, which is not a league which is widely covered by sports cards. He has less rookie cards, which makes them actually very desirable. So I think he got his first rookie card in Obsidian, which was when he was playing for Palmeiras, which is the Brazilian team he came from. That's a great example of a good rookie buy if you believe in the player, because he doesn't have that many rookie cards. Whereas Lamine Yamal, of course, has absolutely shed tons because he plays at Barcelona, who are in every set basically that's made. So that's another factor when looking at players, not just the player as well, it's the cards they have. In terms of Pedri and Lamine Yamal, who do have lots of rookie cards, I'd always focus on the most desirable brand, which is obviously Chroma and Prism, and I'd go for a lower numbered PSA 10. You got to remember that even though the soccer market is growing a lot, it's still printed to a lot less. It's not printed as much as NFL or baseball, because we don't really get parallels above out of 399, and even those are only in certain sets. Whereas I know you guys get parallels sometimes out of four figures. So some of the lower numbered PSA 10 stuff will be low pop going into those World Cups. And if you believe in the player, that's the sort of stuff to target, in my opinion.
What about leagues like the MLS and things like that over here in the States? Is there
Mm.
any opportunity for, you know, maybe products that are more prevalent in the US almost to partner with people in the UK or vice versa to kind of lean into those products that are produced more in different parts of the world?
Potentially, I'll be honest with you. My knowledge of the MLS is pretty poor, so I'm not sure how qualified I am to answer that question. Experience with sports soccer cards, though, is that in short, the answer to that question is yes. So, for example, Panini have just acquired the rights to the English Football League. So the Premier League is the FA, the Football Association, but all the leagues below that are run by the EFL, which is the English Football League. Panini have just got the EFL license, and hopefully they'll bring out a soccer set for EFL cards. I can guarantee you that will be a hugely in demand set in the UK and also some in some other countries, because there are so many collectors of those teams that have never had a sports cards before, ever. So it's with that we're in that sort of point with the soccer card market. I don't think you could really say that about any American team, because you get cards even for college teams, whereas we've had nothing even below the Premier League in England for basically 30 or 40 years. That will be the same, I think, across the Europe for different markets, but it's hard to say which ones. I think the MLS is an interesting one. My problem with the MLS really is that they get a lot of players that are playing at the end of their careers who've already had a lot of cards by that point. But that's not to say that things wouldn't change. I think it depends a lot on what the card companies bring out for those leagues. They could definitely do some interesting things with, for example, legends that are played in those leagues. There's amazing players that play in the MLS and in Canada, for example, that they could make great sets about. But a lot of the sort of current players that are playing are not that widely liked outside of potentially fans from those teams in the US.
That makes sense. Makes sense. You mentioned Prism, and obviously Prism has lost all the licenses for the major sports over here in the US. Now
Yeah.
they'll maintain soccer.
No. The Premier League is now going to tops. It's already they've
Yeah, that's
now.
right.
Yeah.
So you got, but then you also got the news that they might be selling here in the near future. How is that, and how is Panini, which is obviously more prevalent in the rest of the world, how's that going to affect your business at all?
It's really hard to say. Panini in Europe is a different animal to Panini in America. They're both behemoths, but for different reasons. Panini have produced the World Cup stickers, which are the most iconic soccer collectible in Europe since, like, I think it's I think nearly a century or something. Sorry, nearly a half a century.
Yeah.
So they are a staple. And if you mention to anyone in the street about card collecting and they're a normal average person, normally the thing they'll make the reference is, oh, do you mean like the World Cup albums? And that's Panini. That always has been. Obviously, they still got the World Cup license. I think that will be the one that will be the most important for them going forward. I think it's hard to say. I think, to be honest with you, that the amount of work Topps are doing in the UK right now means that I don't actually see anything getting worse. I only see things getting better. We've had the Fnatic store open in London and on Regent Street, which is a big retail street in London. And that's brought in so many people into the hobby. I've met a few people at the London Card Show over the weekend who've come into the hobby because they've walked past the shop, walked in out of interest, and now are in the hobby. So Topps are doing great things. Fnatic are doing great things for the UK market. But the one area that I'm not sure about will be the case hits, and I think this is a similar thing for the people in the US, is how will Topps take the case hit stuff going forward, because we've had Kabooms for Premier League, we've had Mangas for Premier League. The recent Mangas and Panini were unbelievable. They're amazing cards. Will we get the same level of case hit from Topps? Well, that remains to be seen. I'm sure we'll get some great cards, but it just depends whether the market likes them.
Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit to the comp that is being kind of the secret sauce behind your business even. And, that obviously yeah, I agree with you. I mean, putting time and effort into that is a full-time job in and of itself on top of the business of selling cards, right? You've made a lot of different types of content behind the scenes, educational, vlog style, what type of content has resonated the most, and what kind of advice would you have for somebody that's starting off doing that to try to find their own
Yeah,
kind of version?
people have fallen into the trap of thinking, because of the amazing quality of content that comes out of the US, like from Jeff Wilson and Troy and Roth and Carplex 2, all those guys making King of Cards, making amazing high quality content, that you need to do the same thing in the UK. The stuff that's done most well for me is just the real, like, authentic, raw, behind the scenes stuff. It's just me with my phone showing the day-to-day life. These are the orders I'm packing up. This is what I bought. This is what I'm going to sort out today. People love that stuff. I get so many comments about that. They're not really that interested in, like, these high quality production movie style videos. At this point, that might change, but right now it's just about learning about the actual sort of ugly side, or the less documented side of running a full-time sports car business. That's really resonates with people, and people love it. Bear in mind, I'm not a big YouTuber by any stretch of the imagination. I'm very, very small fish in a very, very big pond. But the fact that you can cut through even at my sort of level, which is not big, shows that there is an appetite for it. And it's the stuff that's just the real authentic. This is Joe. This is what he does. This is how he does it. And it's insightful because of that.
Yeah, I think what you've just said there, I think is one of the traps that everybody falls into, is thinking that maybe they're
100%.
not as big as they want to be, or those types of things. But I mean, like, you're getting, and people are getting, think if you got 1,000 people to watch your video, which I'm sure you're killing. But if you put those people in a movie theater and you had 1,000 people
Yeah.
watching you'd
Yeah.
be like, man, it's freaking pretty impressive,
Yeah,
and
exactly that.
people got to resonate with that. But I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think that's one of the things that I was attracted to your channel about was, yeah,
Appreciate it.
you were, it was just like you flipped it on the camera with your phone and you're like, hey, look, this is what I'm doing today. And the whole documenting the process of building anything, I think is somebody's always on a step behind you, or maybe a few steps ahead of you, and willing to offer some input, or like, man, I can avoid that mistake, and I can maybe do,
Totally.
there, because Joe shared that with me. And I thought what you've been doing is awesome
I appreciate that.
in
And it
that way.
makes people feel like they're not, because no one's going to be king of the cards on day one. So it makes people feel like that actually then they're not behind or doing a bad job. It just makes them feel like they can relate to it, because this is also what I'm doing as well.
Yeah, and I think, and again, I mean, those guys, King of Cards. I just had Troy on the podcast here as well.
Yeah, he's probably my
Yes.
favorite American
Yeah,
YouTuber.
he's
I love
awesome.
his content.
Yeah, he's awesome. And all those guys are, but like, they'll tell you, I think, that it's hard when they've kind of almost pigeonholed themselves into a particular type of content to continue to kind of drive, to come up with ideas to make that engaging and fun. I think what you do by just kind of documenting the whole thing, you always have something. There's always something new and some way to grow. And I
That's
think
exactly actually that's nail on the head, to be honest with you, Ron. Yeah,
yeah, I think that's super smart. What's been, I think everybody maybe goes through it a little bit, but, there's a good portion of everybody that says, like, I don't care. But when you put yourself out there publicly like that, and especially when you're selling pictures of pictures on cardboard, like, how have you been able to resonate, kind of just like building this business, but putting it out there so publicly?
to be honest with you, I'm in that I don't care bracket. Like, if I'm gonna do something, I want to do it 100%. I don't really care what people think, because even if you get the odd sort of person being not very nice to you or whatever, the positives of the doing it considerably outweigh the negatives. And like, I've had a few people ask me actually recently, like, oh, like, how do you get into content? And you don't get into content. You just turn on a camera and put yourself out there for the first time, which is the hardest thing to do. And then it becomes easier each time. And I almost guarantee you, especially in the UK right now, where we've got a very healthy hobby, that you're going to get, for 9 times or 9.5 times out of 10, only positive things said about your content. People being nice to you, people being interested. The 0.5, just I don't know if you can swear on this podcast, but just like sod them. Yeah, fuck them. I mean, it doesn't matter. They don't impact your day-to-day life. The people that are positive and engage with you at a car show do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's one of those things where you just have to, I just told my wife this. I mean, we're 50 plus years old, and she's getting into the content game for the first time, even though,
Great.
in a different way. And I'm like, if you're not embarrassed by your first piece of content, like you waited too long, if you're not, you got to just do it.
Correct.
And you get to a point where like you're on a plane and you're videoing something and you just don't care what people around you because you
Yeah.
know what it does for your business.
And you know what as well? It's actually done quite a lot for my confidence. I'm not a super confident person generally, actually, but putting myself out there and realizing actually nothing has really changed is actually a very empowering feeling, because you realize actually most of the time no one really cares what you're doing. They're thinking about themselves. And, actually it's very empowering feeling to know I'm going to record this video. People are going to enjoy it. And actually that one person that's walking past thinking, what's this weirdo doing, is actually you know, just has no impact on my life compared to the positive response you're getting from everyone who's watching the content. And as you say, it's a good point actually that you make. Like my most recent video, I think, got 1.5K or something views. That's a stack of people when you actually think about that in a room. It's a ton of people, and it's it makes you feel good. It makes you feel proud.
Yeah, it should be for sure. Well, we end the show with some resources here and just kind of quick hit questions. What's one PC card you'll never sell?
Mine's very niche. Mine's very, very niche. I've got a Doctor Who card of Rose Tyler from when I was a kid, and I could never get it. And it's one of the first cards I ever bought when I got back into the hobby with a bit more money. Never selling that ever.
What's a player that you're currently buying?
In the UK, it's Legends at the moment that I'm looking at. And this isn't one player. Sorry, I'm going to slightly dodge the question, but any legend from the 90s in the UK I'm looking at right now.
I think vintage.
Yeah. Yeah.
A soccer card set that you think will age well for the long term?
2014 Prism and 2017 Chrome were the debut Prism and Chrome sets for soccer, but they get quite a lot of focus because they were the first Prism and Chrome sets, and those are the brands everyone thinks about. This 2015 Select has amazing cards in it, was really not that high printed, and is still relatively cheap.
Yeah, that's cool. What about you said you went to the National? What's a dream card show or an event that you want to attend?
I think the next one for me will be Dallas Card Show.
Yeah,
Just to get, I think it'll be a completely new experience, and I'll learn so much from going.
Well, I guess on a side note, which maybe it's a London card show, but which event over in the UK would you recommend people go to if they're going to pick one?
London Card Show, no shadow of a doubt. It's the biggest card show in Europe. It's the most advanced card show in Europe in terms of the market, and everyone's there.
How many times? How often do they have that?
They're once a quarter, so 4 a year. But there's one in April at the London Excel. And for those that don't know, the London Excel is like the biggest convention centre in the whole of London, basically. And it's going to be basically national size. Not as big as the National, but for us, like a national size show with literally tens of hundreds of tables. It's going to be mega. So then there's going to be booths as well, like actual booths like you have in the National. So that's the one. That's the big one. I already know people are flying in across Europe to that one. I think we'll probably get some US guys. That'd be the one I'd say come to if you think of coming to the UK for a show.
For those that are kind of replicating the 1,000 card project and they're trying to flip their way up to $100 cards. The two strategies that have really worked the most for me have been the flick throughs and flipping those to $2 or $3 and then taking that profit and buying $100 legends, essentially. What's a middle strategy that you think would work good to kind of maybe level up into the $20, $30, $40 cards?
Yeah, I mean that would be my go-to strategy, what you just mentioned, to be fair. But I'd also say like picking up cheaper slabs of legends in the UK. But bear in mind that we don't have PSA or any of the grading companies on UK soil, so slabs are just slightly harder to get here. Generally, you can't buy massive collections of slabs like you can in the US because grading here is more expensive and takes longer. So that mid-range of £20 to £40 legend slabs do very well for me because they just always sell and aren't super readily available like they are in the US potentially.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's good to know. Well, lastly here, just, I can't recommend your YouTube channel enough, but you mentioned TikTok and Instagram. Where can people stay up with you on everything that you got going on and the eBay store and the whole deal?
I appreciate that, Ron. Yeah. So my personal content page is JJJ Cards, which is in the bottom left hand of my screen. You post a lot of my day in the life videos on YouTube under JJJ Cards, and I've got a lot of my sort of content that I'm trying to put out is on my Instagram and TikTok. I've also got my business, which is called That Card. So I've separated out my personal profile from my business page as I look to grow the business and potentially bring people on board. You can find me there on eBay and Instagram mainly.
It's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate, you sharing on this, but more importantly, I just appreciate how you go about your business and sharing it with everybody and put the content out there. I think I have a lot of respect for people that do that.
Absolute pleasure. It's really great to speak to you, and thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.